into this case. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, under our rules, because the state bears the burden of proving the charges beyond a reasonable doubt, the state has the opportunity to do a reply after the defense's closing statement to you. Ms. Murphy. Before you get started, if you want to stand up and stretch for a second, we're going to finish this before we take our next break. All right, counsel, I think the jury's ready. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello again. Let me start with the first thing that I think defense and I agree on. Kiara committed first-degree murder. She willfully and deliberately killed Grace Jennings. That does not seem to be a point in contention in this trial, nor has it ever been. Kiara committed first-degree murder. And that is not your job to sort out. It's a fact. Your job is to sort out Isaac Apodaca's culpability. That culpability is that he aided and abetted that first-degree murder. He's absolutely presumed innocent until proven guilty, and it is absolutely our burden to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, a doubt based upon reason and common sense. And we have given you ample evidence that exceeds that high burden. Defense continues, and I'm going to jump around a little bit. This is a direct response to the defense closing, so bear with me. But defense continually couched Isaac as being cooperative. And I would assert that that's extraordinarily incorrect. Isaac fled the scene. He called his mom and not law enforcement. And then he spent the next several hours lying repeatedly to law enforcement in a demonstrable way. That's not cooperation, that's manipulation. It was an attempt to remove himself from the spotlight once he realized that Googling how to dispose of a body wasn't going to give him the information he needed to in fact help dispose of the body, the thing that he'd agreed to do prior in the night. Once he realized that wasn't going to work out, Isaac put Isaac first, and he bounced. Defense talked about Lanny McCulley and said that she was only here to protect Kiara McCulley. Kiara McCulley's case is done. She has taken a plea. And as long as she cooperates and doesn't lie, her sentence is set. Lanny said, I'm here to protect myself, thank you very much. And Lanny didn't hear any evidence of the murder. Neither did the neighbors. The police checked. This was a decent amount of distance, an insulated garage. You can actually see the insulation rolls in some of the photos, an insulated home. And even if you could hear over the TV that was usually kept loud, Isaac was with her, other than when he went to go number one, I think is what he called it, to pee. So either Isaac's in the house also hearing someone get murdered and doing nothing, or no one could hear it inside the house, or at least Lanny couldn't. But Isaac still knew what was going on because he had put everything into play. Defense asserted that there is no evidence beyond the messages in this case, and the messages are absolutely damning and they're absolutely relevant. We also have the defendant's admissions, Kiara McCulley's testimony, which is evidence. The testimony of civilians or individuals is yours to weigh out, but it is evidence just like any other kind of evidence that you get to weigh and determine the strengths and weaknesses of it. And Dr. Welner's perspective, and defense just spent some time kind of more or less asserting that Dr. Welner might be a quack, when in reality, Dr. Welner has spent the last 30 years in the field of forensic psychiatry, has testified nationally both for the prosecution and the defense, and that he followed the best practices in his field for doing a case review. He reviewed all of the underlying data, which included the April 4th, 2022 case file, which he had acknowledged that he had reviewed. He uses data to reach evidence-based conclusions. Research, he relied on research in talking about coercive control, trauma bonding, and gaslighting. Defense said that in talking about the second-degree murder, talked about the actions that could create a strong probability of death. And it's important that we understand why this is a first-degree murder and not a second-degree murder. Someone picking up a gun and shooting in the general direction of another individual creates a strong probability of death, but it doesn't necessarily mean they've reached the deliberate intention to kill. They've weighed out all of the factors contained within forming that deliberate intention. Here we don't have that. We have a prolonged, and we felt what a 2-minute period could feel like, prolonged attack using a pre-planned weapon with the aid of a co-conspirator and a co-defendant. It took minutes to carry out, and that minutes is actually the amount of time it took her to die after the injuries were inflicted. So it's going to be a longer period because we know this wasn't a single shot fired. This is multiple slashes and stabs. It was not instant, like Isaac promised Kiara it would be. Defense stated that the interrogation that Sergeant Vigil, who's been trained in some particularized techniques, was not reliable, and that's just not borne out in the evidence. Dr. Welner, who has testified on false confessions and coercion and that subject matter, defense was the one who questioned him about it, said there were no elements of a coerced confession here, that the techniques that he was continually pressed on, oh, did you use minimization, maximization, or over-amplification? No. Did you develop a narrative in advance that you just pushed throughout? No. Sergeant Vigil spent the first hour and a half plus just listening to Isaac talk and asking follow-up questions. There was no narrative at play. He was information gathering. He was on a truth-seeking mission. Isaac at one point in those messages says, or in his interview, with Sergeant Vigil, I was just sending those messages in correspondence. Really? Because it sounds like the defense couched it as joking around, saying, Puggle, I'm wanting you to kill her, saying, she sold you into the sex trade, talking about which weapon to use, how to use it, north, south, east, west, voila, she dead, telling her that she had multiple personalities and to try and summon the angry one. That doesn't sound like jokes, that sounds like inducements and persuasion. Defense and I agree on a second point, that this was a murder that took anger and rage and passion to eventually access, and that had been fomenting or building over a period of years. There wasn't this initial bout of rage when Kiara first saw Grace, and they actually even spent some time talking in the garage together. It was an untapped resource, but that had been building and been fueled over a prolonged period of time. And who was providing that fuel? Isaac Apodaca. When Kiara first met Isaac at the mall and Grace was there, she didn't see Grace and have some epiphany that she'd been gang raped. No, it was once she started dating Isaac Apodaca, 6 months in, he started telling her about it. He spent years cultivating this narrative. He spent years pressing for this to happen, and he finally had an opportunity to get Kiara to execute it. And the psychological benefit is the power and the control. Getting someone to do something really dangerous and really stupid. Dangerous for them too. Defense asserted that there's no evidence of Ghost. Well, okay, I think we all agree that Ghost is not a real organization, and no one actually thinks that Isaac Apodaca founded a secret vigilante killer group. But as to Isaac playing into the fantasy of Ghost and Kiara believing it, there is ample evidence. Discussion of a kill list, discussion of using the barn as a backup location, perks in the black market, filing reports. Oh, I'll edit a report about your kill. I'll just change it and say you did it. Kiara having a platoon tattoo or insignia related to her belief in this organization, and the mention of, oh, we'll get the money in the Bitcoin or crypto wallet. He fueled over and over and over again these notions, and yeah, she had some weird belief systems that many of us may not identify with, but those were her deeply held convictions. She truly believed her intimate partner when he would tell her things. He had a power dynamic that is almost impossible to imagine how it could reach that point, except we had a forensic psychiatrist explain how it reached that point. And it was through cultivated sex work, through domestic violence, and through years of manipulation and pushing and pushing and pushing. To say that this is a joke is laughable, or that this was a joke. To say that, oh, she was drunk, so maybe she's a poor historian. Well, if we accepted that, which that doesn't really seem to be borne out, as no officers testified that they smelled anything on her, and Sergeant Vigil felt comfortable conducting an interview with her much later in the day, that would require you to believe that then Isaac Apodaca jokingly told a drunk homicidal person how to use a weapon and then attacked all of their psychological weak points to just try and, as a joke, press these things forward? No, this was intentional. He wanted this to happen. He knew the narrative that he had built in Kiara's brain, and he still let Grace come over. Who brings someone to their home that they know that their partner hates at the very depths of their soul when you're the one who's set that narrative in motion for years? Someone who wants that person to kill the other person. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Welner provided us, as I said, evidence-based data and information about the techniques and about the relationship and about the history. But we don't have to show that he put a gun to Kiara McCulley's head. We don't have to show that she felt in fear for her life. Caused, helped, encouraged. Those messages bear that out. The defendant's admissions bear that out. And whether you want to view this evidence, in this case, as showing that Isaac Apodaca is some architect, or whether you want to view him as maybe he's a puppet master pulling Kiara's strings when he touches on those psychological weak points, or maybe it's just a poor attempt to be a Marvel comic book character named Null Void that didn't really work out for him and he got caught. He is the one that set this into motion. Isaac Apodaca bears responsibility for Grace Jennings' murder. Isaac Apodaca helped, encouraged, and caused that murder. Kiara has taken her responsibility, and ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you return verdicts for the guilty on both counts.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a final instruction for you before you retire. Instruction number 22. I will now ask you to retire to the jury room to begin your deliberations. You will be provided a copy of these jury instructions, and exhibits introduced as evidence will be made available to you. All of the photographs, the discs, those will all go back with you when you start your deliberations. Any of the other items that are in bags, you have access to everything, and if you need to open any of those exhibits, the bailiff will bring you gloves so that you can do that safely. We won't send those back immediately, but anything that you want is available to you, and the bailiff can retrieve it for you. Prior to beginning your deliberations, you will need to select one of you to act as foreperson. That person will preside over your deliberations and will speak for the jury here in court. Forms of verdict have been prepared for your use, and I'll just review them with you quickly. With respect to each of the charges, there is a guilty and not guilty verdict. All of the verdict forms have the same caption on top, and it simply reads, and you've heard this dozens of times over the last week: First Judicial District Court, County of Santa Fe, State of New Mexico versus Isaac Sampson Apodaca, defendant, and then the cause number, which you probably have memorized, D101CR 2023-25, and then my name. And then as to count number 1, there is guilty and not guilty verdict forms for count number 1 as to first-degree murder. Also as to count number 1, there is the lesser included guilty and not guilty verdict forms as to count for second-degree murder. With respect to count number 2, there are guilty and not guilty verdict forms for conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. If you'll recall, the instructions walk you through the process to help you kind of organize your deliberations, as well as how you have to return verdicts, particularly with respect to count number 1. You will take these forms to the jury room with you. When you have reached unanimous agreement as to your verdict, the foreperson will sign the forms which express your verdict. You will then return all forms of verdict, these instructions, and any exhibits to the courtroom. From this point forward, any communications with the court need to be in writing and signed by the foreperson. As I told you at the very beginning of the trial, when one of you asked if there was a formal transcript, the answer to that is no. There is the recording that has been made. So if there's actual testimony that you want to hear again, would ask you to be as specific as possible as to the testimony or the conversation, so we can locate that and narrow it down, as I mentioned before a week ago. Otherwise, you basically have to sit and listen to the entire trial again to be able to find that. So we would ask that you be as specific as possible. Also, you can take your notes back to the jury room with you. And as I told you at the beginning of the trial, at the end of the trial, once verdicts are returned, then all of your notes will be destroyed by the bailiff. At this time, I'm going to charge the jury. As you know by number, you are 15 and only 12 can retire to deliberate. So the following individuals will remain in the courtroom while the other 12 begin to retire. So Juror Tenorio, Juror Ortiz Reyna, and the jury instructions have the winged clip on them. The 6 possible verdict forms are paper clipped together, and those are what I'm handing to the bailiff. Would all rise while the jury departs?